Hi, this is Brass Check, and we're recording this on Saturday, September 21st, and we're talking about the latest Zionist extremist terror bombing of civilians. And of course, you may not realize I'm talking about what happened in Lebanon, and I'm going to explain why that was an act of terrorism in a second. But I want to remind everybody that every day there are terror bombings going on in Gaza every day. And clearly civilians are being targeted. And thanks to our news media, thanks to our presidential candidates, thanks to our political class, this information is not getting out to people. And anybody that dares to just point out the obvious, in the United States at least, gets shouted down, targeted, attacked, the same old routine that they're so practiced at. Let's look at this Lebanon situation. In warfare, you're not allowed to just roll a grenade into a market or a playground or a school or a medical facility or any other civilian infrastructure where civilians are present. Okay, I know that may be a shock to some people because of what's been going on in this world, thanks to the United States, the government, thanks to the Israeli government. But that's the rules of of war. Okay, that's not part of warfare to roll a grenade into a playground or a public market where civilians are present. When you weaponize pagers or walkie-talkies or whatever, you're essentially putting bombs in people's pockets and detonating them. You don't know where those. First of all, you don't know who's going to have the device, and we know one child that was killed. Many others that were injured and maimed for life. We don't know who's going to be holding the device. We don't know where the device is going to be. There is some close TV footage, closed circuit TV footage of a guy in a market. There was somebody else in a restaurant. Endless scenarios by which absolutely innocent people could have been killed and were, not could have been, were killed. That's number one. So this is a clear, unequivocal violation of the rules of law. Period. End of story. And if you think it isn't, imagine another power doing this in our country. That wouldn't be an act of war, right? So the illogic of the sick people that are pursuing this agenda never ceases to amaze me. But we must not fold to their logic. These are psychotic criminals, okay? And that includes the United States government that's involved in this, and the UK government, any other government that's supporting this. Now, the vast majority, by the way, of the governments of the world oppose this. This is in clear, and when I say this, I mean this attack on citizens, on non-combatants in Lebanon. And, I can just hear the psycho Zionists saying, oh, well, they were Hamas. Well, maybe it was a Hamas bookkeeper, or maybe the Hamas guy lent the pager to his child. That's not how war works. You do not indiscriminately shell, shoot into, bomb, attack known civilian areas. All right. Now, that's going on every single day in Gaza. And according to Donald Trump and Joseph Biden and Giggles Harris and demented, I'm sorry to say, Bobby Kennedy, regardless of what they have to say, it's a crime. It's a crime. There are laws against it. There are international laws against it. There are U.S. laws against it. It's called terrorism. We have a whole multi-billion, probably approaching trillion-dollar infrastructure called Homeland Security that's supposed to be fighting terrorism. All right. And then meanwhile, we have another part of our government funding it through Israel. Now, historical reality check. There was no such thing as terror bombing in the Middle East until the Zionist extremists showed up. And it's a historical fact. Just did not exist. It was not included in warfare. Bombing, the most famous case is the King David Hotel, where Jews were killed. And the attitude of the Zionists, by the way, you can look this up. The Zionists responsible for that, one of them became prime minister of Israel. Those Zionists never apologized to the families of the Jews who were murdered. That has not happened yet. It's 2024. So British employees of the British government were murdered in that bombing. And what was the point of that bombing? To terrorize the British government and get them to leave Palestine so that the Zionist extremists, terrorists, could have their way, which is they clearly have had since 1948. Somehow that's okay. That's not terrorism. That's not anything that needs to be sanctioned or mentioned. But the point is, it was the Zionist extremists that brought bombing of civilian targets to the Middle East and terror bombings. Okay, that wasn't a thing. It had occurred in other parts of the world, on a one-off case. And often it was false flag stuff. But the systematic terror bombing campaign and sabotage campaign and assassination campaign, assassination of public leaders has been a policy of the Zionist extremists since before there was a state of Israel. There are at least three major people in an ambassador negotiation role who, because they had moderate, and Europeans, by the way, employees of European governments, by the way, who were assassinated because they were taking a moderate stand in the negotiations between the Zionist extremists and the Arab population that lived in Palestine. I know of three, at least, historically. A very famous one is Moyne, M-O-G-N-E. My spelling might be wrong, but look it up. Absolutely unbelievable criminality by these people. And it's been going on for decade after decade after decade. And now they've added a new level of terror and horror to the world by sabotaging personal communication devices and not caring what the outcome could be to innocent people. So a new form of criminality, this isn't warfare. This is terrorism. If you look at the laws of war, this is not permitted in the laws. Now, maybe it has to now, thanks to the criminality of these psychopaths, maybe now it needs to be specifically written. You may not. What if one of these guys was piloting a plane? What if these guys was operating a very sensitive industrial process somewhere where a mistake could have resulted in the death or maiming of other people, innocent people, perhaps thousands of people, someone running a gas line or so. I mean, there are jobs where if you screw up, you will have killed a lot of people. Now, surely the psychopathic criminals who run Israel and who the United States supports could have foreseen this. If they were smart enough to sneak explosives into personal communication devices, they were smart enough to foresee all the possible horrors that this thing would have created. So this was an act, again, and it's happening every day. We need to remind ourselves, it happens every day of the week. Civilians are being targeted. This is terrorism. Terrorism with the intention of genocide. And, we look at some of the medical journals out there where serious people are looking at the likely casualty statistics in Palestine. And we know, anybody with a shred of logic knows that it can't possibly be stuck at 40,000 people. That is impossible. It's more likely over 100, and some legitimate scientists, and these are scientists, these are not, people just guessing, these are people that have a methodology for doing this, are estimating that it's over 200,000 people dead in Gaza alone. That's about 10% of the population of the entire region killed in a most horrible way, right? I mean, they're not only, blown to bits, they spend the last days, weeks, and months of their lives living in constant terror. And this is the Israeli government being controlled by Zionist extremists supported and funded and encouraged, because if you're doing a bad thing in the world, in the real world, if I know somebody's doing a bad thing and I hand them a gun and they go and commit a crime with it, guess who's going to jail? But that's not happening in this case. I don't know, it will take a lot of historians and to figure out how our country, I think it's absolutely clear who's running it, what their morals are, what their objectives are. Pure criminality, right? It's not pockets of criminality. It's not episodes of criminality. It's pure criminality. And that includes our news media and all the magazines and all the newspapers and all the opinion leaders and all the celebrities that are going along with this. But I want to point out one other thing. Not only have the Israelis created a new form of terrorism and introduced a new form of terrorism, because they used to use personal communication devices to target individuals, military individuals, and make an attempt to get that person strategically. That's a little dubious. But it was some kind of ethical attempt. So all that ethics has gone out the window. And now it's open warfare, by the way. So here's the point. Not only was this a terrorist act, not only did it violate the rules of law, they have now given every psychopath in this world a new idea on how to kill, maim, and create mayhem. Okay, this was not a thing before the Israeli Zionist extremists did it. And what's the United States saying? Nothing. What's the UK saying? Nothing. In fact, in the UK, they're jailing journalists that bring up anything about what's going on in Palestine. So I don't know what analysis you've heard of this. I've watched some. I'm kind of shocked at how light-handed it's been. This is not only an act of horror and terror for the individual victims of this. This is an act of terror against the entire world. They have unleashed a legion of demonic activity, which is what they did when they were taking over Palestine, when they were attempting to take over Palestine. They started with this pre-Israel. This is what the Zionist terrorists were doing. They didn't do this because there weren't pagers, but they were bombing places. They were assassinating employees of the UK government. They were bombing hotels with guests staying in them. Okay, this group of people is the group of people that brought terror to the Middle East. I'm not saying the Middle East was ever a perfect place. No place on earth is. But this level of sadism and destructiveness and frankly satanic activity was not taking place in Palestine or anywhere else in the Middle East until the Zionist extremists came and started doing it. And then, by the way, since then, bombing and terrorism are now like a common thing. It was not the case pre-Zionist extremism, right? And now, thanks to them, in 2024, a brand new methodology has been launched on the world. And every psychopath, every criminal, every government dirtbag, every intelligence agency now knows this trick. And they're going to use it. It's going to come up again by some other group. Maybe not. Maybe, for instance, the one encouraging thing is we don't see any other country on this planet relentlessly bombing, shooting, starving, cutting off the water supply to hundreds of thousands of civilians. We don't know so far. It hasn't been a year yet. So far, no other country has decided to follow Israel's the most moral army and the most moral country in the world. But that's not even a year. So we don't know. Anyway, I can go on and on about this, but beyond the criminality, beyond the horror, these profoundly evil people who are being supported by profoundly evil people in our country, have now set a standard and created a model for a new act of terrorism against civilians. So anyway, that's brass check, and keep being aware. If you know anybody that can listen, explain these things to them, because they're certainly not going to get it from their local government officials. They're not going to get it from the news media. And strangely, I just don't hear people speaking like this clearly on this subject. A lot of good stuff out there, of course, but I had to do this video because I didn't see anybody lay it all out from A to Z. All right, that's it. See you later.
You know things are bad when communist China has to give moral guidance.
President, I thank Algeria for requesting this meeting and welcome the presence of Lebanese Foreign Minister Mr. Abdallah Bou Habib. I listened carefully to the briefings by USG DiCarlo and High Commissioner Volker Turk. Thousands of communications devices in Lebanon, including pagers and two-way radios, were detonated remotely and simultaneously. The explosions caused thousands of civilian casualties. China hereby registers profound shock and grave concern over this development. Children playing in the streets lost their eyes. Mothers shopping in supermarkets had their limbs maimed. Doctors on their way to work were critically injured. These and other harrowing scenes are distressing beyond imagination. Remotely detonating communications devices in indiscriminate attacks, causing mass civilian casualties and panic in society, is unheard of in history. This act is, without a doubt, a gross violation of a country's sovereignty and security, and a blatant breach of international law, particularly international humanitarian law. Is an act that tramples on human lives with unconscionable callousness. The attacks were so outrageously brutal and atrocious that they deserve nothing less than condemnation in the strongest terms. So far, no one has claimed responsibility for the said attacks, but different parties have come to more or less the same conclusion as to who did it. We call for a prompt, full investigation to hold the orchestrators and implementers to account. Right now, the situation in the Middle East is hanging by a thread. Israel's military operations in Gaza are still ongoing, which have already claimed more than 40,000 Palestinian lives. Meanwhile, Israel is also heightening the tensions around its border with Lebanon. We are informed by some analysis that the recent remotely executed attacks are a precursor to major military operations. We have also taken note of the latest statement from the Hezbollah leadership. We are deeply concerned by the possibility of a further escalation of the tensions between Lebanon and Israel. We call on the parties to exercise maximum restraint and call on Israel in particular to forego its obsession with the use of force and to halt without delay its military operations in Gaza, its violations of Lebanon's sovereignty and security, and its adventurism that risks dragging the region into yet another devastating catastrophe. We strongly urge countries with influence over Israel to take tangible steps to stop Israel from going further down the wrong path. We support the Security Council in taking all necessary actions and doing all it can to ease the situation between Lebanon and Israel and to maintain peace and stability in the Middle East. Thank you, President.